Good afternoon and welcome to the Great Exhibition Road Festival's Explore at Home series. My name is James and I work in the public engagement team at Imperial College London. We're one of the festival partners. Throughout Explore at Home, we've been investigating the convergence of science and engineering and technology with the arts, the creative industries and other areas of culture and society. And our regular day in the life of talks have allowed us to do this through exploring some of the careers of some of the fascinating people who work or who have worked in and around our home on Exhibition Road. Today, we're going to be looking at the concepts of storytelling and play and how they can be applied to the worlds of electronics and coding and engineering, not just because that sounds brilliant and a recipe for all sorts of really creative ideas, but also because it could diversify routes into degrees and careers in those areas. Joining us to discuss this is a former student of ours at Imperial, design engineer Aisha Hussain. Hi, Aisha.
Hiya, thanks, James. Glad to be here.
So before we get started, I just wanted to say a few things around to those watching at home. This is an interactive event, so please do send us your questions and thoughts. I've got my colleague Mimi, she's not on camera, but she's working away in the background, monitoring the YouTube chat, and we'll be passing on your comments to me to read out and put to our guest. Could I just ask everyone, be considerate of each other when you are posting. We want it to be nice and friendly and welcoming, so don't post anything to disrupt the experience for others. So if that's all understood and everyone's ready to get started, Aisha, I wanted to start with that description of you as a design engineer. I don't know if everyone at home will know exactly what that means. Can you give us a bit of a description, maybe what it means to you, maybe some of the things that design engineers get up to in their sort of day jobs?
Yeah, sure. Just firstly, thanks for the introduction. And just, again, to briefly reintroduce myself to everyone watching. My name's Aisha, and as mentioned, I've just graduated from a degree in design engineering last year. So yeah, I guess just a brief description of what design engineering is. I kind of like to think of it as the merge between like a traditional engineering degree, like traditional engineering knowledge and practice, but merging that with a culture of design thinking, innovation and enterprise. So I do definitely think of it as like a bridge between both of the disciplines, because like on the one hand, there's, definitely a foundational kind of strong engineering focus to the work that I do, which makes it different from, say, product design or industrial design. But there's also a huge focus on like user centricity and human-centered design, which you often don't get in a lot more like traditional engineering degrees. So with that being said, it's really broad, and you can honestly end up doing a lot of different things depending on what your interests are and what field you kind of want to go down. But I guess that's it in like an overarching nutshell. But maybe it'll be more clear like when I talk about some of my projects and things I've worked on.
Yeah, I think some of those themes is that sort of convergence of a traditional engineering potentially and sort of user-centered design. I hope that will come through in some of the projects that we'll talk about throughout this session. So I wonder, let's start off with one. Let's dive into one project in particular, and then we'll later on we'll sort of go through your backstory and a bit more about who you are. But let's start with a project. So I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the craft club that you created and how you designed it to appeal to a sort of a wider demographic of people who might usually get involved in coding, which is, I guess, what it was focused on.
Yeah, sure. So the craft club was my final year project at university, and I was looking into creating a design intervention to diversify the field of electronics and coding, which, I mean, I guess from experience, but then also from my research is still really heavily white male dominated. And what I found was that, those stereotypes are created from really young. And I wanted to address that in a product then aimed at younger children to try and tackle those stereotypes from earlier. So my aim was to, try and create a product or an experience that shows kids, and I guess also shows parents and anyone involved, that computer science and coding and tech isn't restrictive, and it's also not exclusive to particular groups of people. And also importantly that like you don't have to separate technical subjects like computing from creative ones. They're definitely really interlinked, and you can have interests in both fields and still get involved. So that's kind of what the craft club does. It combines coding concepts, so like really simple things, because it was aimed at young kids. So creating blinking LEDs and introducing things like for loops and stuff.
So I'm going to show a couple of pictures you sent through. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about what we're looking at in these to get, sort of help illustrate the story a little bit.
Yeah. So that there is the entire kit, and basically it was designed to be like an introductory kit for a child. So on the right there is the kind of storybook, and it was based around a concept called like learning through storytelling, which is really powerful for young kids in getting them to like engage with learning in a way that's really playful. So essentially what it does is each chapter, it goes through a very well-known children's story, and each chapter is like a new coding concept, but then also a crafting activity that they can get involved in. And everything in the kit is basically all the bits and pieces that they need to do those different challenges and activities. And then hopefully by the end of the book, a child's been able to explore coding and electronics through creative means, but then also learn some core things that they can then go off and read up more about. The idea was to complement this with like an online experience, but yeah, this was kind of the main part of the kit. And I think there are some example photos. Yeah, so this is one of the chapters, for example, where they can create blinking LEDs and like create origami animals and stuff, or obviously linked to the story.
So, yeah, very colourful, rainbow striped rabbit, maybe a hare. His ears are quite long, so I'm going hare, but yeah.
Yeah, that was one of we did some testing of it, and this was one of the kids' creations, and he went very creative with his choice of colours for the rabbit.
And then we've got, this gives you a sense of one of the sort of more technical components of the kit, is this right?
Yeah, so this was one of the later chapters, and it's the black paint there is conductive paint, and then there's conductive tape and some coin cell batteries and LEDs that you can paint onto. So basically the idea is that a child can, instead of playing around with physical wires, they can create like painted circuits. So a bit more creative, I guess, for the child to explore ways in which they can play around with electronics, but yeah, in a bit more of a creative, fun way. Very messy, as you can tell, but fun.
Yeah, it's not obviously sort of the technology is kind of hidden, not hidden behind the story, but it's there to sort of bring the sort of storytelling and playful element out of it, rather than the technology and it being sort of the front and center part of the interactivity.
Yeah, exactly. That was kind of one of my main focus points, was how can we get kids or people to interact with tech in a way that's perhaps less intimidating, because in the more traditional sense, it can be intimidating for someone who feels like they're more of a creative person or someone who doesn't really engage with those kinds of things. So in this way, like, kids who wouldn't ever probably play with those kinds of things could hopefully engage and interact with it in unique ways.
Thank you very much for that. So yeah, if anyone watching at home has any questions about the craft club, about sort of the concept behind it, or the vision behind it, or the sort of realities of it, yeah, please do put your questions in the chat, and Mimi will sort of send them on to me. I wondered, in terms of the sort of the market research you did, I wonder if we could explore that and look a little bit about existing products and programs that are there to get kids into coding. I think I'm slightly too old that this sort of initiative hadn't happened by the time when I was at school, but I know I'm aware that it's a big thing now. So what sort of stuff you mentioned? There was a lot of robots out there potentially. I wonder what sort of approaches you came across in sort of your market research, and how, especially in the context of diversifying routes into it, appealing to people who wouldn't necessarily sort of see coding and that sort of electronics as something for them. I wonder if you could talk about it in that type of context.
Yeah, sure. So you're right in that in a lot of my research, both kind of like reading up about it, but then also I went to a few festivals and things. There was an EdTech festival I went to where they had loads of, as you were mentioning, like robots that are basically like aimed to teach kids how to code, because this
is from EdTech, is it right?
This is from the EdTech festival. Yeah. So this was one of those robots where you can connect to it through your iPad, and then basically like with a bunch of block coding and stuff, make it do really cool and sophisticated things. And some of the robots are really sophisticated, and you can learn loads from it. And they're really great to teach those principles of coding to young kids, definitely. And there's a huge push. But I think, from when I was there and also just reading up about it, I guess my concern was just that all of the robots are kind of similar in their core design, and they cater towards a particular child. That child being one who enjoys playing with robots and gadgets. And I think for me, it was coming from my own personal experience that I wasn't that child, and you don't necessarily have to be into those kinds of things from really young, like the age of 4 or 5, to be able to get into the tech field or code later on in life. I guess it's similar to me, if I was younger and I was told, oh, to be an engineer, you have to really like enjoy taking apart gadgets in your free time and build crazy, buildings and stuff out of Lego Technic and stuff. I probably would have thought, okay, well, this is just not for me then. So I kind of wanted to address that. And also a common theme as well with a lot of these robots or toys was that they're very, very expensive, like a couple £100 each, which for an educational product, like could be fair enough, but they're marketed kind of as toys for young kids. And I guess a parent would probably only buy that for their child if they're already really keen or engaged with the field. And I guess it also excludes those who can't really afford it as well. So my aim with the project was kind of to think of more of a unique embodiment to get a bit more of a diverse group of kids engaged with the field, that would also address the affordability as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess we don't necessarily want to say that sort of, robots in themselves shouldn't appeal to one group of demographic more than any others, but the reality is the society we live in, they're kind of already marketed at certain kids, and maybe I don't know if we can say that they're more marketed at boys, or there's a gender imbalance there. So if your recruitment strategy or your sort of introduction of a subject is only focused on those sort of narrow routes, which have been sort of potentially gendered, or like they sort of tend to market towards certain people, you're not going to address that imbalance through in terms of people who then come through to your courses and through your sort of degrees and things like that. That makes perfect sense to me.
And I guess also even to do with like the diversity of what you can do with coding. There's more than just moving robots around, which is a very cool aspect of it. Don't get me wrong, like it's very, very cool to see the kinds of stuff that they can do. But there's a lot more obviously to the field. It's so broad. I kind of wanted to explore those parts that aren't really explored.
Brilliant. So in terms of things that you saw from that sort of market research phase that kind of inspired you, whether they were within coding or within other initiatives, I wondered if there's any there that you wanted to pick out, or things that sort of took your eye and thought, oh, that's something we could look at.
Oh yeah, there were definitely loads of cool initiatives as well. A few for adults actually, which I then kind of was inspired by and then adapted it for more of a child-friendly product. Like for example, one that comes to my mind is there was this e-textiles product where you can buy sewable components and then sew your own wearable tech. And I say wearable tech in quote marks because obviously not like Fitbits and Apple Watches and stuff, but kind of things like light up jackets so that they blink when you're cycling and stuff like that. And it was really cool because it was more inspiring for me seeing like the response to it, because people who had expressed otherwise no interest had then suddenly like interacted with the tech field in some way that they felt comfortable with and found themselves really enjoying it and kind of exploring other things they could do. So I found that one very cool. There was a few more, like there was some research projects as well. There was one that was this art exhibition that was an interactive exhibit. So for example, say there was a display of like spring and flowers and bumblebees and things. When you interact with the display, all the actuators and the sensors were visible, so you could kind of see the flowers blooming and how that's happening. And it was a research project, so they kind of spoke with the kids beforehand about kind of their interests and things, and then observed kind of which kids were the ones interacting with it, and they found that the ones who had expressed no interest were the ones interacting with it the most.
Oh, right.
And that really inspired me as well. Just that like different embodiments and different ways to interact with traditional tech encourage different people to get involved, and that's kind of what I wanted to try and incorporate.
Great, yeah. We had we've had our first question come in, so which was about the crafting club project, I think. So the question from SG Images with a Z, they asked, did the children link the storytelling and craft activity to coding, or was it explained as a connection? So how how upfront were you with the kids that this is what you're learning about in this, or was it kind of, did you allow it to sort of surreptitiously or sort of sneakily feed into their brains?
It was kind of a bit of both. It wasn't too upfront and direct that this is lessons about coding, and you're going to learn kind of these objectives all laid out at the beginning. Kind of just to keep it like playful and not so handheld and guided, like allowing the kid to kind of just explore what they want to do and take from it what they will. But obviously it was also educational, like that was the aim. So kind of each chapter would have like the storytelling element to it and a description of the crafting activity, and that was the main focus. But then obviously, talking a bit about like the core coding concepts that they would have learned. So, this is how the LED, this is what an LED is, and this is how it's blinking and stuff. And obviously getting more and more complex as the chapters would go down. So, and we did test it to kind of see whether they did pick up those coding concepts. And they definitely did. So, yeah, but it wasn't so kind of in your face, so to speak. It was more kind of subtle in the way it was designed. Yeah. But yeah, I guess stealthy in a sense, but that has negative connotations. It was focusing on something that's of interest to them, and then showing how that these technologies and things can sort of enhance that experience. I don't think rather than sort of sneaking it into the curriculum or anything like that. Yeah, because my concern was making it really complicated really soon, and then putting a child off who's never really it's probably their first time interacting with something like that. So yeah, that was kind of the aim.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much, SG Images, for that question. That was great. Yes, please do. Anyone else who has any other questions for Aisha, please do send them through. I wondered, we talked a little bit about storytelling, which is kind of one element that sort of comes through a lot of your work. There's also the element of sort of play, or sort of, I don't know whether structured or unstructured. There's all these terminologies around sort of child development and that type of things around play. But what do you see in terms of its benefits in terms of teaching new skills around coding? As someone who's sort of gone through university, and do you sort of feel it's a more inclusive approach that could appeal to a wider range of people if you sort of focus on play initially, for example?
Yeah, so learning through play is a concept that I kind of came across in an internship that I was doing with the Lego Foundation, which maybe we can talk about.
Yeah, come back to that.
It was it's a concept that's definitely effective for a lot of different things, not just coding. But I wanted to use that concept for this project, mainly because, again, from my own experience, but then also speaking to people, like the tech field can be really alien to a lot of people and quite intimidating. And obviously, like play is, the whole idea is to make things fun and engaging and I guess like explorative and in your own hands. Because, I guess with play, like there's no right and wrong, and, you're learning kind of without barriers and without restrictions. So you kind of have the freedom to take your learning in your own direction. Like it is handheld, but it's not kind of guided. So I guess, particularly for younger kids who'd be interacting with coding and with the tech field for the first time, it would be like more of an inclusive way to introduce quite an alien field to them before getting into more of the complex concepts. But like once that interest and that intrigue is kind of built, then building on from there, if that makes sense. Yeah,
and I wonder, it's not probably, I mean, it might be quite. I think maybe one part of the reason it appeals to children is it's slightly different from the sort of traditional sort of school model of learning something and then applying it. There's a little bit more of a freedom and unstructured there, which probably isn't actually dissimilar to how designers and design engineers sort of there is still a structure and a framework around things, and they're like, there's the principles of user-centered design and all that type of stuff. But there is sort of an element of sort of creative ideas and seeing what works and sort of working together and sort of throwing ideas around. So I think I wonder, I don't know, maybe you've come across that in your own studies or in your own, now you're in the workplace, like that. It's not dissimilar to the sort of ways that us adults, I guess, tend to work. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree that you're kind of, I guess, like through school you're kind of taught that this is the way you learn, and it's very kind of rigid and academic, which works in a lot of fields. But yeah, they're definitely like bringing creative aspects and innovation and kind of freedom to bounce ideas off and like be out of the box, like thinking, is also really powerful, and is definitely something that I use loads throughout my uni degree and hopefully beyond now as well. Yeah.
We had another question from Anastasia, which was on, I guess this links a bit to the sort of market research phase. So she asked about publishing in scientific journals, to read more on that sort of development. I don't know if you publish at sort of a master's degree level, but I don't know if you read any of the sort of academic thinking around learning, and there's a lot about sort of learning theory and things like that. I don't know if you sort of consumed any of that when you were sort of developing the ideas for the project.
Yeah, so as you said, I haven't published a journal myself, but a big part of the project was to kind of read up on a lot of scientific journals out there, and kind of the extensive research that other people have done into kind of children's learning, and what are the best principles and practices to teach children even basic concepts, and even like behavioral studies as well. I looked a lot into as I was mentioning before, the stereotypes around the tech field, in adults and in children as well. So there is a lot out there, a lot of research out there, but that definitely shaped a lot of the work I'm doing. But my work itself isn't published anywhere, unfortunately.
Great. Thank you very much, Anastasia, for that. And I wanted to move on to another project that you were involved in, which looked at augmented reality. It featured wooden toys. So again, there's this element of play to it. And it was teaching kids about sort of sustainability and social challenges. I have an image that I'll bring up on the screen. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about that project as well.
Yeah, sure. So this was another project also in my final year as well. And it was a project for a module called like enterprise rollout. So a team of us were basically building an enterprise idea, and our project team was quite passionate about sustainability, and we wanted to sort of focus our enterprise idea around addressing that topic, and again addressing it in younger years, in a way that's engaging for kids, because obviously sustainability or like social challenges is a very broad and complex topic with so many different aspects to it, but it's also really important for future generations. And from speaking to parents, speaking to teachers, it's a topic that sometimes I think for me it wasn't, but I guess going forward it's addressed in schools in a very kind of traditional way, like in PSHE classes and things, but kids kind of switch off in those classes anyways. We wanted to kind of, again, similar to my other project, explore learning through play as a really powerful teaching method, but outside of the classroom. And so, as you can see in the photo, our idea was to create a board game that you play with physically, but then also you can interact with it using AR. So you can play different mini games and challenges based on a particular topic to do with sustainability. So, for example, one of the levels or challenges would be a lesson based on global warming, and the whole game, would be based around that. So it was kind of bridging the physical and digital play was like our main kind of selling point, I guess. Because again, having spoken to parents, they were concerned with their kids spending too much time on apps and iPads and stuff, but a completely physical model would also be kind of wasteful. And, buying an entire board game and things with all these bits and pieces only to be kind of thrown under the bed after playing with it 2 or 3 times would be quite ironic if our main aim was teaching about sustainability. So yeah, it was received quite well as well. We did some workshops with it. We made some prototypes, so the mock-up of one of the complete lessons, which was like a mystery for the child to solve, and it included one of the mini games and some of the AR as well. And they really engaged with all the aspects of it, especially the AR. And we quizzed them at the end to kind of see how much of the sustainability concepts they actually picked up. It was quite a lot. So yeah, it was received quite well.
Yeah, it's nice that a project looking at something like augmented reality and introducing that to a young audience doesn't have to completely get rid of the sort of tactile, handheld, object-based learning as well. You can do both, and also I guess there's an element, like you said, like longevity of the product. You can update the experience of a physical object through in the digital world really easily, and so maybe increasing the shelf life, or preventing the storing it away under the bed and never seeing it again. Time through sort of that sort of mixed approach. I think there's definitely makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And like there is definitely a divide. You know, there are lots of parents who are really kind of keen to keep their kids playing with physical toys for as long as possible. But then also a lot of parents who appreciate that, like, that's kind of not the age that we're in anymore. And like kids want to be playing on apps and computer games and iPads and stuff. So we kind of just wanted to address both of that and think of a way in which we could sort of tackle both in one.
Okay. So what I'd like to do now is sort of go back in time a little bit, go back to young Aisha in West London and learn a little bit more about your story becoming sort of getting interested in engineering and how that came about. If anyone at home has any questions about either the Sustainability Wooden Toys project or the Craft Club, you can still send those in, and we'll happily move around a little bit and come back to those at various points. But yeah, maybe if I could start with your sort of personal story that led you to ending up in sort of doing an engineering degree or a design engineering degree and moving into that space. Is that an ambition you always had, or where did that start?
Did I always? I didn't always want to be an engineer, definitely. I kind of think of myself as like falling into it. Like as a kid and as a young adult, I enjoyed maths and science and those kinds of subjects at school. But I also enjoyed other subjects like languages and artsy subjects. So I kind of, for a long time throughout high school, I struggled like figuring out, what career path would be good for me for a long time. It wasn't actually until I spoke to other female engineers. I went to a girls' school, and so they'd have like careers fairs and bring students in, like alumni in. And when I spoke to them, and also I guess visiting universities and speaking to current students, that's I guess when I first started to properly understand the field of engineering and realized like maybe this could be for me. Otherwise, I think before that, I guess my perception was quite stereotyped, and I never really felt like I belonged to that. But yeah, once I went into it, I really loved it. Like mechanics and electronics and coding and stuff were areas that each I really thrived in and really enjoyed. But obviously, like as mentioned before, my degree also wasn't completely technical in the sense of like traditional engineering. It allowed me to also explore like design and innovation and enterprise and stuff. So kind of bridging the technical with the creative. But yeah, I didn't always want to be an engineer, no.
Yeah, you did. You said to me before that you saw yourself as more of a sort of an arty school student potentially, and a creative outlet was kind of always going to be quite important. Have you felt that these sort of projects? I mean, they seem quite creative to me, I guess. But have you felt that they've given you that sort of creative outlet? Some of the projects you've been involved in, and the sort of the general area that your sort of your education and your sort of career has taken, the path it's taken.
Yeah, definitely. I never thought of engineering as allowing me to do that before I got into it. But I guess that's why I really enjoyed the degrees, because I got to kind of, from an academic perspective, explore more creative aspects within what is traditionally thought of quite a technical degree. Yeah, because I am quite, I guess I have like artsy, hobbies and interests as well. Like I really enjoy design, like video editing and graphic design, for example. And even at school and stuff when I was younger, I always had, like, as you said, some form of a creative outlet. But I always kind of considered them as like more hobbies or things to do in free time as opposed to like pursuing them in my career. So yeah, that's kind of, you know, what I've really loved about studying design engineering, and all of the projects that we get to do, is that it gives me the opportunity to kind of bring that creative edge to the projects that I'm involved in and keep them fun and creative, as well as obviously learning like technical stuff as well.
Great. I wondered about sort of your sort of first early experiences of coding, or even your awareness of even what that term meant prior to that sort of first experience of having a go yourself. Is there a sort of, did you have a perception of who a coder was, or what a coder looked like before you sort of went to university, or maybe before A levels? And it'd be good to know, are those preconceptions, are they problematic? Are they quite widespread in your experience? You know, I don't look like what a coder and what an engineer looks like. As a young Muslim woman, it'd be great to hear about your sort of personal take on that.
Yeah, I unfortunately did have those stereotypes, and I think a lot of young girls did, and I think still do. And I think it definitely got in the way of me perhaps like pursuing or exploring the field sooner. I mean, I got there eventually, but yeah, it definitely kind of was a bit of a roadblock. And as you said, like I had a bit of a stereotypical idea, I guess, of what an engineer or what a computer scientist like looked like, kind of like white male, or even kind of like computer fanatic. And I say that in quote marks just because like someone who's kind of loves computers and like a gamer and takes, you know, electronic stuff apart in their free time and stuff. And all of those different things just wasn't me. So I don't know, I guess I just never saw myself in the field. And if I'm being honest, I don't really know where I got these stereotypes from. Probably just like subconsciously from like how engineers and how I guess anyone in the tech field was portrayed in like movies and books, and even like how people around me spoke about them. All of those different things probably like fed into my mind and created this image that I didn't really fit into, which is why, as I said before, like once I actually started to speak to current students and speak to female engineers and actually hear that, you know, actual experiences, that's when I properly realized what the field actually is. And I do think that, you know, that was my experience, but I think the world is definitely shifting. Like even from my experience actually going to uni, it was quite diverse, and you know, it's every year kind of it's getting more and more diverse, and probably a decade ago, like I don't know what the demographic would have looked like. So that's obviously really great. And I also think there is a long way to go in tackling those preconceptions, which unfortunately like a lot of people still have.
Yeah. I guess within a school's context, especially maybe it's still the case, maybe 10 years ago is different, but you have a UK context to like technology and engineering. Now as a sort of an adult, you can see the global context. You can see the pioneering investment in technology in the sort of Middle East, in India, in all the, in Silicon Valley. You can see the CEO of Google. You see the tech industry looking at this like a much more diverse place than maybe it looked within a UK context 10 years ago. I don't know. I don't know whether that's fed down into schools. I mean, I haven't been in school for ages, but maybe, I don't know. But yeah, within that sort of school context, it's a slightly sort of narrower view of that space, I guess.
Yeah, and it's definitely like is diversifying loads, not just based on gender, but like even as you were saying, like socioeconomic backgrounds and ethnic backgrounds and stuff. It's definitely like the doors are opening up, and I guess like people are kind of seeing the field as a lot more diverse than perhaps a couple of years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. We had another sort of comment and a question from SG Images again. He said, or he or she says, art engages children's practical, explorative understanding that expand connections to material consciousness. That's quite deep, SJ Images. But then says, can education change to emphasize the balance between creative practice and thinking? I think so we talked a little bit earlier about sort of the maybe slightly the sort of nature of the classroom is quite like you get taught how to do things and how to use things, and how, rather than sort of exploratory creative sort of play, I guess, with a new technology. So I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, I guess, that you haven't said so far.
Yeah, I guess like that, yeah, as you said, like pretty much addresses, what we were speaking about, the concepts with learning through play, and allowing like creativity and exploration to feed into like more traditional, like I guess rigorous learning. Yeah.
So let's fast forward to sort of your university days, I guess. We can look at, it'd be nice to maybe look at some of the projects we worked on alongside the sort of the craft club and the sort of sustainability wooden toys project. And you can talk a little bit about sort of your university days and the sort of things you did during your degree, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the craft club and the Lessons by Susie was the sustainability project in my final year. But we, throughout all 4 years, like did what felt like hundreds of projects, but obviously wasn't actually hundreds. So the learning was definitely really diverse. We studied everything from like design and enterprise to, as mentioned, like electronics and mechanics and computing. And it was really great to kind of learn and put into practice how those otherwise seemingly separate fields are really interlinked. So I'm not sure if I think you have a few of the pictures from.
I have one with a dinosaur in it. Can you talk a little bit about dinosaurs, robot dinosaurs? I mean, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, sure. So this one was an electronics project actually, where we were creating self-balancing and dancing robots, which sounds really fun and weird. It was. So essentially we had to code this robot to be able to sense and pick out beats in a music track, and then also like create a fun little routine for it every time it picked one up. And also the self-balancing aspect was, as you can see, it's a mini Segway on 2 wheels. So we needed to use like its internal like gyroscope and accelerometer to make sure like while it was dancing, it was not falling over. So it was just like a fun kind of, obviously like quite technical concepts in there to code it. But like at the end of it, we like dressed ours up like a dinosaur, and all the different teams like had their little robots, and we had like a dance competition. It was really fun.
So dancing robot dinosaurs isn't enough. We need to jazz this up a little bit more by making them dance.
Exactly.
And then we've got this one.
This one, this was our, I can't remember the name of the module, but it was a mechatronics or like physical computing project, and our team like basically it was to like interact with physical computing in any way and keeping it fun and whimsical. So our team created like a musical pinball machine. So basically like a user could interact with it, and every time they play a game of like classic pinball, when the ball like hits different bits in the machine, it would trigger different sounds based off of like the sensors and stuff we put everywhere. And the aim was to kind of, by the end of the game, they've created the song. So again, the project was really whimsical and fun, but just like playing around with sensors and actuators and user interaction. But as you can see, like the theme in all of our projects is we kept it creative and kept it fun.
And then finally, robot with a big smiley face.
Yeah. So yeah, this one was a robotics project where our challenge was to use the robot to build a pyramid out of bricks, which we've achieved, as you can see. This to me was definitely a lot more complicated than some of the other projects I'd done, because the way this worked was we first like built it entirely in a simulation environment before moving to the real robot, which was really tricky for me wrapping my head around that. Because I'd gotten quite used to kind of like prototyping really hands-on and like being in the workshop and playing with things kind of directly. Then like moving completely to simulation was quite different for me. But we made it eventually. And yeah, like as I said before, like there are so many other projects that I did do at uni. Like just 3 examples, but I guess like it's good insight for what your career could look like as a design engineer, like doing loads of fun, cool projects. But it's definitely something that when I started off, I didn't really anticipate. I hadn't really done subjects like DT or spent too much time in workshops and stuff before university. So initially it was a really steep learning curve, but I guess like, as in our different projects and with your teams, you kind of learn together, and that in itself like was really fun as well.
And as well as those projects, in terms of getting a sense of what the subject has to offer, you also had an opportunity to do some sort of work experience or go out into the workplace. And you worked, I'm not sure where you worked, but you were working with the Lego Foundation. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that placement and some of the projects you got involved in there. Because Lego sounds like a great place to work.
Yeah, so it was in our third year, we do a 6-month placement. And yeah, like I wasn't working directly with Lego, but I was working with a very small design studio in London. And they were kind of working on a few projects with the Lego Foundation. And like, luckily I got to help out with a few of those.
See a picture of some of the work you were involved in, yeah?
Yeah, so that one was one of the main ones I was working on, which actually was a lot of my inspiration for the craft club. But yeah, as mentioned before, like the Lego Foundation, their core kind of like thinking and methodology is all around learning through play. And kind of this internship was when I first kind of experienced that more like in depth. So yeah, this was one of the projects I was working on. And I guess like leading on, this workshop was with young children at a local primary school. And we had like little cardboard robots and magnetic coding boards, basically, that they could craft onto. And we set out to sort of explore low cost creative ideas to teach coding, with the emphasis on low cost. And yeah, it was kind of, the kids really engaged, especially with the crafting activities, which we didn't really anticipate, because the main focus of the workshop was around the coding boards and the magnetic like coding boards and the coding, and the crafting activities were kind of tacked onto the end, but actually that was what they engaged with the most, because I guess it allowed them to be really imaginative with what they thought they could achieve with coding and stuff, rather than just moving a robot around a board. So that's definitely what kind of inspired me to do my final year project, but I ended up taking it in a very different direction to what I was doing on my internship. But the core kind of concepts and stuff were definitely like my main inspiration.
Great. We have another question here from Liuan Gao, who asked, how did you gain the knowledge that enabled your projects to engage users' cognitive abilities and achieve the project objectives? So she mentioned particularly around sustainability in education. So was there any particular reading you did, or any particular sort of market research for the wooden toys, this Susie's project that you were involved in around sort of sustainability and how to introduce those subjects to sort of young minds?
Yeah, I guess for both projects, we did a lot of this, because obviously working with kids and both projects being educational, we needed to make sure that obviously we're doing learning through play and keeping it playful and fun, but our core aim was to be teaching core concepts. So we needed to make sure there was some way of validating that the kids are actually learning something and there is some educational value to the product too. So yeah, that validation was mainly done through like workshops and testing. I mean, it was preceded by a lot of research. So there was like user insights. So we spoke to parents, spoke to kids, spoke to teachers about kind of learning methods that they use and they, advise us to use, what's most effective in the classroom, what isn't. Also, I guess like more market research, and I guess like literary research. So, reading scientific journals and what kinds of things, big research projects have done in terms of kids learning and what's most effective, and then kind of use those to shape our prototypes. But the most effective way to test whether any of it was working was actually building a mock-up and kind of, allowing a kid to play with it and seeing their response. So with the sustainability project, for example, we had at least 10 kids, like separately interact with our like low fidelity prototype, we call it, which is basically like a really basic mock-up, and then kind of quiz them at the end to see kind of how much they actually picked up and which bits of it they engaged with. And they were kind of our like main feedback point. and using those insights to then kind of go into the next stage of like iteration on it. Yeah.
Great.
I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I think that does, absolutely. So we're just coming to the end of today's event. So I wondered if I could finish off by sort of bringing the story right up to the sort of the present day, I guess. So you've left us at Imperial, unfortunately, and graduated. Not left us. Left us sounds negative. You've graduated and you've gone out into the world of work. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about what you're working on now, and give a sense of what a design engineer, once they've graduated, can sort of get involved in.
Yeah, sure. So I graduated last year, and 2 months ago, I'm like losing track of time. 2 months ago, I started as a graduate like technology architecture analyst, which is basically a long name for someone working like on tech related solutions for clients, like mainly around the cloud. So at the moment, as I said, I only started 2 months ago, so I'm kind of in like a training phase and learning loads of new like tools and technologies that I've never really come across before. So I am getting to code quite a bit in this job. And to me, it's still quite challenging. I'm no expert, but the opportunities to like learn and upskill in those areas is really exciting to me, especially in quite a fast-paced environment. But I guess, in a few years' time, when I've actually stuck my teeth into it properly, I'll probably be able to see, how I'm finding it. But it's definitely, I've gone down a very kind of more tech-related route. And maybe a few years down the line, I'll try and like bridge some of that design and creative stuff back into it as well. But yeah, that's kind of me at the moment.
Brilliant. We just had a quick final question from someone called Fix Your Aim, who was just asking about the sort of the gap between your school life and then your design engineering university. What came in between? I don't know, you talk about A levels, or what sort of did you study and then before going to university?
So I went straight from graduating school into my first year at uni. I didn't like take a year off or anything, but yeah, I mean, I guess like in between then and starting uni, I was doing loads of like engineering related competitions, I guess, throughout school, and like work placements and stuff where I could find them, to try and like, I guess, put myself in the field before committing to it fully. Sure. Just to kind of see, it was more for myself, just to see if I could see myself in it and if I enjoyed it, because I didn't want to start a 4-year degree and then realize, this really isn't for me at all. So that's kind of what I did, but I wasn't being too rigorous about it. I was kind of just taking different opportunities as and when I found them, before I started.
Brilliant. Okay, I think that's just about that's all wraps that up. Then thank you so much, Aisha, for joining us today and sort of telling us all about your career and sort of talking like so inspirationally about how we can sort of open up these opportunities in coding and engineering and electronics to sort of new minds or a wider demographic of young people. I think there's a lot there to take away from today. For those of you who are watching at home on YouTube, if we were unable to get to a question or a comment, I do apologise for that. But a recording of this discussion will soon appear on the Great Exhibition Road Festival YouTube channel, so you can watch it again. You can share it with friends, colleagues, or wherever you want, really. All future live events from the Great Exhibition Road Festival will continue to post these on this YouTube channel, and you'll get a notification. If you subscribe with us, you'll get a little notification every time a new one is posted, so do click the subscribe button at the bottom of the YouTube channel. My colleague Mimi, she's going to post a link to an evaluation form. It's where you can spend 2-3 minutes and just tell us what you thought of the event. We'd really appreciate the feedback in terms of how we sort of structure these and topics and things we might explore in the future. So yeah, please do take a couple of minutes just to fill in that application form, that evaluation form. Otherwise, I think that's about it from me. One final huge thank you to Aisha Hussain, a former student of ours at Imperial College London. Thank you so much for joining us, Aisha. It
was a pleasure. I really enjoyed this discussion.
Brilliant. And yeah, to everyone at home, thank you very much for your time. Please have a lovely Monday afternoon. We'll see you at a future Great Exhibition Road Festival. I think we've got some next week, so we'll see you then. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you.